Hello and welcome to this tutorial. Today I'll be going over how to create a PBR scene using different types of image maps so that you can create good looking montages quickly. This tutorial will also be helpful if you are new to Blender and want to learn about texturing. Before we get started, you'll need an extracting software such as 7-zip in order to extract the image textures from the download files. I will leave a link to it in the description below. Let's get started by understanding what PBR means. PBR stands for physically based rendering. The aim of PBR is to achieve photorealistic renders by recreating lights that you see in the real world, as well as by creating realistic textures by manipulating the material's properties. So in order to achieve photorealistic scenes, we're going to need to have two things. We need realistic lighting and realistic textures. So I have opened up Blender. We are going to start with the lighting. So the first thing we are going to do is change our render engine to cycles. The main reason why we are going to use cycles is because cycles uses true ray tracing, meaning that it calculates light bounces relatively like it does in the real world. Next, we are going to delete our cube by left-clicking it and clicking delete on our keyboard. We will then add a plane by clicking Shift-A on your keyboard, then to Meshes and then left-click plane. Next, we are going to open the Shading tab at the top of our screen. This is where we will be applying our image textures to our plane. An image texture is an image used to create our material. You will have different image textures to manipulate different properties of that material, such as the color or how shiny it is. We're going to come down to this tab here. This is called the Shading Editor, and this is where we'll be applying our image textures. Here you can click on this button called New, and it will make and assign a new material to our selected object, which is our plane. As you can see, our material is called Material 0.001. This is because it is actually our second material that is also called Material. If we click on this button next to our New Material button, you'll be able to see all of our materials, and as you can see, we also start with a material which just happens to be called Material. You can switch in between the materials by clicking on the material you want. If we look down below, we have our principled BSDF node. This is where we will be plugging in our image textures. The next thing we are going to do is find and download some image textures. So I have come to cgbookcase.com. It's a great place to get free and good quality textures for your scene. I will also leave some other sites that offer good quality and free textures in the description. If we scroll down and take a look at the workflow tab, we are going to be using the metalness/roughness workflow. Make sure it is selected, and you'll also want to choose the quality of the texture you want. This is going to depend on the use case. For example, the closer your camera is to the texture, the higher the resolution you want in order to avoid any pixelation. Of course, depending on how taxing your scene is and what your PC specifications are, you may want to use a lower resolution texture to avoid lagging your scenes and longer render times. I personally would go for 2K or 3K, or maybe 4K for close-up textures, but I recommend trying different resolutions until you find the right one. If we scroll down below, here is what we are going to get in our download. I'm going to explain each one of these once we get into Blender. I'm going to download this pack, and afterwards we will extract the contents. Feel free to make a folder. I'm going to make mine on my desktop. Next, we are going to go to our Downloads folder and open up the compressed folder by double-clicking it. Then we will drag and drop the image textures into the folder we've just made. Now let's go back to Blender. The first thing we are going to do is add our color to our plane. To do this, we are going to go to the top left where it says Add, give it a click and go to Texture and then Image Texture. Then left click to confirm the position of the node. Next, we are going to find our color texture. To do this, we are going to click on Open, find our way to where you saved the image texture, then click on the one named Base Color. It could also be called Color or Albedo. Next, drag the color output of your image texture and connect it to the color input of the principled BSDF node. A quick tip is that everything on the left side of the node is an input and everything on the right side of the node is an output. Let's take a look at our texture in the rendered preview mode. We can do this by clicking the sphere in the top right hand corner. As you can see, our bricks are a bit big. We're going to make them more like a pavement by shrinking out the texture. To do this, come down to the bottom left part of your screen. We're going to click on this button, which is called the editor type. Next, click on the one called UV Editor. Next, we are going to left click on the object and press Tab on our keyboard to enter editing mode. We will then click A on our keyboard to select all. As you can see in the UV editor, vertices and edges have now appeared. Next, click S on our keyboard. This will allow us to scale our vertices and edges to the proportions we want. Use left click to confirm the transformation when you're happy with the sizes of your bricks. Next, we're going to look at ambient occlusion, or AO. This is going to darken our shadows and make them more pronounced. This will also help with making the bricks look more 3D. This is an optional step, so take a look at your texture and see if you would like more shadow. If you're not sure, add the ambient occlusion and see what you prefer. In order to apply your ambient occlusion, we're going to click on our image node and press Shift D. This will duplicate our image texture node. Left click to confirm the selection. And we will click on Open Image. This button looks like a folder. And we can select the image named AO or Ambient Occlusion. Color space of this node to non-color, as this image texture doesn't contain any color data. Now we are going to press Shift A on our keyboard and we are going to scroll down to Color and then left click Mix RGB. Place the Mix RGB node in front of your image textures. We will then disconnect our color image texture node and instead put it in the first color input of the Mix RGB node. We will do the same with our AO image texture, but instead plug it into the second color input. On our Mix RGB node, we will change the mixing type from mix to multiply. And finally, we will connect the Mix RGB node to the base color input of the principled BSDF. As you can see, we can now zoom into our texture using the scroll wheel and use our mouse to adjust the factor of the Mix RGB node. This will determine the strength of our shadows. Find an amount that you think looks nice. I would personally go for something around the 0.6 mark. Next, we are going to add the roughness map. This is going to determine how much reflection a material has, as well as how smooth or rough a material is. This can also help with making the object look more 3D and realistic. Again, we're going to duplicate our image texture by clicking on it and by pressing Shift D on our keyboard. We can then place it down here, find your roughness texture and apply it by clicking on Open Image. Now we will change the color space to non-color as there is no color data in this image texture. We will then link our color to the roughness input of the principled BSDF. As you can see, in the texture, certain parts of the bricks are reflecting more than others. Also, the way the reflection looks has changed. As a bonus, you can also add a gamma node, which can be found by clicking Shift A on your keyboard, going to Color, and then clicking on Gamma. Drag it in front of the roughness image texture and connect the image texture color output into Gamma's color input. As we adjust the slider into the higher numbers, the less rough and more reflective the surface will be. And of course, the rougher and less reflective the material will be determined by the lower numbers. If you don't have a roughness map in your download, you may have a glossiness map. It does the same thing as the roughness map, however you will need to invert it. In order to do this, make sure you have your glossiness map linked to your image texture. Then you'll want to click Shift A, go down to Color, and then click on Invert. You will then place this in front of your glossiness map. You'll then take your color input of your image texture and drag it into the color input of the invert node. You will then lick the color output of the invert node into the roughness. And as you can see, it has changed the roughness according to the map. Next we have the normal map. This will be used to add a 3D effect whilst adding detail without changing the geometry of the object, making it very efficient for the amount of detail you get compared to if you were to just use a lot of geometry to achieve the same result. We're going to repeat the process we have done before, duplicate the image texture and link up the normal map. Make sure to change the color space to non-color. Next we'll click Shift A on our keyboard, go down to Vector and then Normal Map. Connect the color from the image texture into the normal color input and then connect the normal output into the normal input of the principled BSDF. You can control the strength of the normal by moving the slider. As you can see, by doing this, it adds way more detail to the bricks and makes them almost pop out. You can especially see this in the chipped away parts of the bricks. Lastly, we have the displacement or height map. I don't recommend you use this for the purposes of what we are doing, as it can significantly increase render times. I would only use this for maybe a very close up shot. I mean, typically you just wouldn't really use this at all. If you wanted to use it, I'm going to show you anyway. So to do this, you'll add your displacement by duplicating our image texture and finding our displacement image. Again, we'll change the color to non-color. Next, press Shift A and go to Vector and then Displacement. Now let's drag the color output of our image texture into our height input of the displacement node. We will then drag the displacement output into the material's input's displacement. Next, we need to change a setting to apply this map. On the right hand side, click the Material Property tab and scroll down until you see Settings. Click on the arrow to open up the Settings drop box. Then open up Surface and change Bump Only to Displacement Only. The last thing we need to do is add a modifier called Subdivision Surface. This is going to add geometry to our object in order to improve the quality of the displacement. I'm going to increase this to 6. As you can see, the displacement has gone crazy. What we need to do is lower the strength of the displacement. To do this, go to the shader editor and find the displacement node. Adjust the scale to a value of your liking. I recommend holding down Shift on your keyboard whilst adjusting the value, as you'll have more control when adjusting. So let's take a look at our bricks. As you can see, they look pretty nice and they look pretty realistic. As you create and build your scene, the next important thing is going to be the lighting, how you set it up, and it will honestly make such a big impact on how your scene is going to look, whether it looks washed out or poor, or whether it looks really clean and sharp and realistic. There is one final image texture I want to show you, as I'm sure you'll use it sometime in the future. The image texture I'm talking about is the metalness. It will determine what is metal and what isn't metal. To use this image texture, simply repeat the steps of the other image textures, but connect the color directly into the metallic slot of the principled BSDF. And don't forget to change your color space to non-color. That is all I have for you guys. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. I did try recording in a different way. Instead of doing it straight from my head, I wrote out a script and recorded the audio and the video separately. Let me know how you found that. Maybe the flow wasn't as good, or maybe you like it because it was a bit more concise and to the point. But yeah, leave some feedback in the comments down below if you feel like it. If you do need any help regarding any of my videos, feel free to join my Discord server. The link can be found in the description. Thanks for watching, and see ya.